Good morning, everyone. Right. I thought this message is probably better off after Christmas because the Magi came later, but never mind. We're just jumping the gun and getting in early. So, we have our Christmas cards and everything, and the three wise men are always looked at like kings, and they jumped on these three camels and rode off across the countryside to see Jesus. But when you really look at the story behind it all, it's really, really amazing. It's much more amazing than the little images that you see. Matthew uses the word in Greek, I don't say Greek, but it's magos. And when he named these people, magos in Greek means magi or sorcerer or wise man. So most magi were students of the stars, and most ancient societies believed in heavenly signs. They were very much caught up with what's going on up in the heavens. And nowhere in the Bible does it actually identify them as kings. So they're not actually kings. We don't think that they were kings. I don't know why they, maybe because of the gifts they brought. And because there were three gifts, they think there were three magi, but I reckon there was a heap more. I'll tell you why in a few minutes. And the real story of the wise men is a story which illustrates the greatness and majesty of an awesome God. It's a demonstration of how completely God is in control of the world and history. It's actually pretty beautiful. And when I read it and got in behind the story, I couldn't believe how we don't have to be afraid. God is in control. He really is. He knows exactly what's going on, and he's planned it all. Because the story of the wise men began not when the men first saw the star, but 500 years earlier, before Jesus was born. That's when the story of the wise men actually starts. At least, if not more, 500 years before. God set these things in train then. And you know who he used? Which freaked me out, because last week about the angels, I talked about Daniel, didn't I? And about how the angel looked after him in the lion's den. Well, when I started to really look at this, it didn't scare me, but I thought, my goodness, God is really in it. Because it started 500 years previously with Daniel. Can you believe that? With Daniel. With the faithful teenager that was stolen away from when Jerusalem was captured by Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, like a long time before. You'll know the story that he took furnishings from the temple, Nebuchadnezzar, the king in Babylon, and he took people from Jerusalem back to his country. And he told his people, his minions, his soldiers, whatever, go to the temple or to the palace and pick out really good young people, and I want them to come to my country, and I'm going to train them up in our ways and then use them in our land. So, you know the story. Daniel and a whole lot of his friends were taken away to Babylon, and the king said, I'm going to grow you up into really, clever people. We've got all the science here and everything. And he said, let them eat from my table, from my palace, all the good food, the wine. And these were teenagers. And Daniel stood up. Even then, he loved God very much. And he stood up and he said, no. He said to the guy that was supposed to be in charge of them, just give me a chance, he said. We only want to eat vegetables and drink water. Don't give us we don't want I don't know what they ate, fancy stuff that the king eats. And the guy was a bit scared. He said, no, if I bring you in front of the king Nebuchadnezzar in the period of time, and you're skinny and white and sickly, he'll probably kill me. And so Daniel said, no, just give us a chance. Give us a couple of weeks and then compare us to the other guys. And that's what they did. And you know what happened? Do you reckon they looked skinny and weak and insipid? They were healthier than all the other guys and smarter than all the other boys too, because they put God first and they wanted to serve God even as a teenager. Then what happened was the king had this dream that scared him, a big dream, and he was really frightened. And he called all the wise people in his the Magi, they were called Magi even then, the wise sages and clever people in his palace. He said, bring them all to me. Now, I've got this dream and I want you to tell me what it means. And they said, oh, okay, what was the dream all about? Tell us. And he said, no, you tell me what the dream was about. He said, because if I tell you, you'll only pussyfoot around and make up all these things. No, you tell me what the dream means and tell me the dream as well. Man, are you mad? Of course we can't do that. And he said, all right, you're all dead. He said, I'll kill a lot of you, and not just you, your families as well. So they would have been pretty scared. And Daniel and the men from Jerusalem, they were also under this death order. So Daniel prayed to God, please God, help us, tell us what the dream was about and tell us what it means so I can go back to the king. And sure enough, he had a dream that night and God told him all about it. See, we're not so much into dreams, are we, and visions and things like that. But in the Old Testament and in the New Testament too, like we just heard in the reading, Joseph in a dream was told, take Mary and go. And there's a lot of, God sort of dealt with people and told people things in this way in the Bible a lot. The dream was the big statue. He saw a big statue, the head of gold, chest of silver, belly and legs of bronze, legs of iron, and the feet were part clay and part iron. And the king had seen a big stone come smashing the statue, and the wind came and blew it away. So after praying, Daniel was able to tell the king what the king meant. And he was good though. He stood before the king, he said, it's not me, not my wisdom. God has told me all about this. The mighty God has told me. And as a result of that, the king was like, wow. Have a listen to this, Daniel 2. Nebuchadnezzar said to Daniel, your God is beyond question the God of all gods, the master of all kings, and he solves all mysteries. I know because you've solved this mystery. Then the king promoted Daniel to a high position in the kingdom, lavished him with gifts, and made him governor over the entire province of Babylon and the chief in charge of all the Babylonian wise men. So he's the head honcho wise man back in Babylon, 500 years or more before Jesus is born. At Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you heard of them before, to administrative posts throughout Babylon, while Daniel governed from the royal headquarters. So these young people who have been stolen from Jerusalem are now elevated into really important positions in Babylon. Look, it all goes pear-shaped later because King Nebuchadnezzar is a bit, doesn't do the right thing by God, even though he had so much opportunity and realised how good God was. Anyway, another king comes along. His name's Darius. And he brings with him his clan of wise people from his country as well. I never knew any of this in the the Bible. It really was amazing when I read all this. And Daniel and his wise men were absorbed into this big group of wise people. Darius was the king who, last week I told you about, got tricked into putting Daniel in the lion's den. Isn't it amazing? And I told, it was because of the angel, but I told the story last week. It just really amazed me. But how these Magi, this group of scholars, what they did, because there was Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, they were all that group, and there were other wise people that were in this group, and they were Jewish. So they studied the Jewish scriptures and all the traditions, as well as studying astrology and all the other things that the Babylonians believed in and taught. So here was this group of wise men. They were called wise men, Magi, wise men. This big band of wise men, school, you could say, of wise people. And these particular ones stuck to the scriptures, stuck to God. Others went off on other tangents. And that's why the Bible warns us about not getting too caught up in the astrology, that's so big today. That came from that as well. But Daniel's group stuck to the scriptures and stayed true to God. So most ancient palaces and kings had wise people attached to them. Just amazing. It was a great way of looking. They looked for signs in the sky. I read a historian said, for example, on the night of Alexander the Great's birth, Magi predicted that the destroyer of Asia had been born after seeing the sky, seeing the stars in the sky. So there's many times when we see things in the sky and in visions and dreams where God is telling us things. I read Joel 2, this book in the Old Testament, but when you read this, you'll recognise it from, it's in another spot in the Bible as well. This is how God used it. I will pour out my spirit on every kind of people. Your sons will prophesy, also your daughters. Your old men will dream and your young men will see visions. It wasn't unusual, was it? Dreams, visions, the sky. I will even pour out my spirit on the servants, men and women both. I'll set wonders in the sky above and signs on the earth below. Blood and fire and billowing smoke, the sun turning black and the moon blood red before the judgment day of God. It's incredible, isn't it? I sort of didn't realise how much of this stuff that there was in the Bible. Joseph, remember Joseph with his coat of many colours? How did he get where he was? He got up to be head honcho in Egypt. It was because of dreams that God had given him and visions, and he talked to him like that. So many people today, I know, look to the stars for guidance on what to do, but they leave God out of it, so it's not reliable. The Magi had success because they studied the scriptures and found their ultimate revelation not actually in the sky. I wish I could speak. In the stars, but in the final destination, which was Jesus. That's how they did it. The star that they followed wasn't, scientists have said, it was just Jupiter, or it was just some, constellation that happened to, a dying star or something. But it wasn't. It was actually a proper one that God had put in the sky, because it stopped. How can a star stop? Like we read when they got to Jerusalem, the wise men got to Jerusalem, it stopped. And it wasn't until after they were told to go to Bethlehem that the star started again. So how does a normal star do that? It doesn't, does it? So it was proof that this was a real sign from God. And the Magi, they're an example of action. They didn't just study it. They didn't just think, isn't it lovely? They actually went into action and did something about it. Now, this is why I reckon there's more than these three guys. Because imagine going on a trip, not knowing where you're going, who you're going to meet, how long the trip is going to take. You would have to pack for a long journey with an entourage of helpers. These were influential people, and they wouldn't just jump on 3 camels and ride into the desert. They would have had helpers, luggage, food, clothing, bedding, food for the animals if they were using camels, money to buy supplies on the way, and perhaps even bodyguards, because they were carrying gold with them, and there were bandits in that time, and they were going where they didn't know. So this is this big, that's why I put in the messenger, the picture of a whole group of camels marching across the desert, because they would have had a big entourage. So they planned for this trip carefully. It would have cost them a lot of money, it was expensive, but it showed how dedicated they really were and single-minded. And as Ray said, they walked and stopped because they would have had to sleep. They think the trip was about 400 to 700 kilometres. So you try walking from here to Adelaide and do it on 3 camels in, a couple of days. No. This was their quest to search for the King of the Jews, and they weren't going to, sit around. So it's really interesting too. When they arrived in Jerusalem, they started asking around. They went to Jerusalem. The star took them to Jerusalem. And they said to people, do you know, we've come from the east. Now imagine, they've walked into Jerusalem, this big entourage of camels, people wearing different clothes, maybe soldiers were with them, and they've marched into Jerusalem and gone, we've come here to find the King of the Jews, a new King of the Jews. Do you know who it is? And the Bible says that Noel, you read it, they freaked out. Jerusalem freaked out. Hang on, I'll tell you exactly what it says, because I sort of went over it and then came back to it and thought, what's that all about? It says, when word of their inquiry got to Herod, he was terrified. And not Herod alone, but most of Jerusalem also. I thought, what's going on here? Why are they so scared? Until I found out what sort of person Herod was. He was paranoid. He thought that everyone was out to take his position. He killed executed his brother-in-law, 2 of his sons, and even his favoured firstborn son, who was going to take over for him anyway. And you know when he killed him? 5 days before he himself died. Because he was paranoid that someone was coming along to take his throne. So no wonder, because he called himself the King of the Jews. No wonder when they came, these strangers from a far country saying, we've come to worship the King of the Jews, where is he? He freaked out. That's why the Bible says that he was terrified. See, when you really start looking, it's really interesting, isn't it? Well, I thought it was anyway. You probably don't. But and the rest of Jerusalem freaked out as well, because they knew what Herod was like. And they thought, oh my goodness, is this going to start another killing spree? We're scared. What's going on? And I thought, you know what? I thought, just imagine if a group of people from the east, right, you got the picture, whole group of people from the east, and maybe some of them had, like I'm talking today, some of them had weapons, and they marched into London, and they said to London, yeah, we've heard that there's a new king being born, And they said, oh yes, Charles is our new king. No, this is a baby. How much would that have stirred Londoner to think that, and so you can imagine why Jerusalem got stirred up and got really, really nervous about what was going on. So this big contingent of camels, men with weapons, coming in to look for Jesus. And Herod, as we read, wants to kill baby Jesus. He's not having anyone that's going to take over from him. And I was thinking today, Herod today is a picture of what we face in our world today. Our society seems intent on squashing all things Christian and all people who claim to follow the teachings of the Bible. They're being maligned, forced out of their careers and scorned. That's today, isn't it? Herod is alive and well in our society today. You think back in what you read in the papers recently. CEOs have had to resign, rugby players, politicians, athletes, Margaret Court, and you and I are being made to feel that we are intolerant, that we are wrong, that we are homophobic, racist, and we are being maligned. Herod is still at work today. But I reckon don't be afraid of Herods of today. They too one day will bow the knee to Jesus. After they found Jesus, they brought presents, and the poor little baby up there is a bit overwhelmed with it all, but they brought the presents to Jesus, and it says they paid homage. Do you know what paying homage means? It's a pun? Bowing. It's actually a medieval term that they translated the word from. If I was a serf or a peasant in feudal Europe in the Middle Ages and I paid homage to a person, I'm literally saying to them, I am your person. I give myself to you. It comes from, Homo sapien, the Homo sapien, human. So when they came to Jesus, they were saying, I am your servant for life. My life is yours to do with what you want. You have my undying allegiance. They didn't just come and, this is great. They really knew who Jesus was, that he was really special, and they were dedicating themselves to him. And so I think that shows they travelled 700 kilometres and their whole lives would have been turned upside down, but they went to find Jesus. And they then obeyed God rather than Herod. They didn't go back to Herod. As we read in our Bible reading this morning, they went home a different way. And when we meet Jesus too, we don't go back the same way that we were, do we? We go on a new path with Jesus. We continue our lives in a different way. And today we know so much more about Jesus. Oh, I just wanted to tell you, this is my conclusion, you don't have to worry. That the heavens today are still telling us about Jesus, not just through the stars. Psalm 19 says, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech, they use no words. This is the heavens. No sound is heard from them, yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. So the heavens, the stars, the skies, the whole world is telling us about Jesus. And also, if you look in Revelation and other places in the Bible, one day we're told that the heavens will be used to communicate once again, but this time the second coming of Jesus. Jesus says in Luke 21:25, there will be signs in the sun, moon and stars. Today we have already found Jesus. The Bible is our star, and that's how we found him. We don't have to be like the wise men and guess at the greatness of Jesus, the King of the Jews. We know who Jesus is. We know that he is the Son of God. We know that he is eternal and the creator of the world. We have seen him change people's lives. We have seen him influence the whole world so that it will never be the same. We can testify what this amazing person has accomplished even in our own personal lives. We know so much more than the Magi. And are we prepared to be like them and to bend our knee to Jesus today and pay him homage? Because he certainly deserves it. I think, those guys, the rugby, were they Samoans or Fijians or Samoans, were they? Who refused to bend the knee? That is a big deal now. The sports people go bend the knee because we support the black people or something like that. And they wouldn't do it because they said, no, we only bend the knee to Jesus. And I thought how wonderful that was. What a wonderful testimony. And so I'm saying to you today, how about you? Bend your knee to Jesus, pay homage to him. And that means saying, I'm your person, Jesus. I'll do whatever you want. And he's so great. God is just so incredible to think, when you look in the Old Testament, the story of the wise men starts 500 years before in Babylon. He put Daniel in there. And the Magi, the wise men started there. And they were the ones that down through the ages, they kept true to the scriptures, true to looking and waiting for Jesus. It's just incredible. And they weren't Jews. Well, they were originally Jews, but they came from a foreign land to find Jesus. And it shows that Jesus unites both the Jews, both the Gentiles together. So, all right, let's close in prayer. Jesus, today we want to join the wise men and pay homage to you as our Redeemer, the Son of God and King above all kings. We bow our knee to you and commit ourselves to you with all we have. Today we tell you that we love you and want to serve you with all of our being. Thank you for revealing yourself to us and our world. You are the God who put into place a chain of events over 500 years before the wise men would ultimately look for Jesus. Therefore, we acknowledge your awesomeness and thank you that you would care for us, mere flawed humans, meeting today in your grove. Thank you, Jesus. Amen.